Are you buying the narrative that Josh Heupel stood up to the Iamaleava family that, and I spent all that time trying to learn how to pronounce his name. Are you buying into that narrative? Because Caleb, I'm not. I think that ultimately, if Nico would have wanted to come back, Josh Heupel would have allowed him to miss Friday's practice and come back, even though that's an unforgivable sin for no reason. And Caleb, I don't want it to sound like I'm raining on anybody's parade, but the bottom line is the player has the leverage here. And there's a reason that he did this, not before the spring game, but before the end of spring practice and before the spring transfer portal. Caleb, I'm not buying the narrative that Josh Heupel had all this under control and everything's golden. I think the Nick Iamaleava, the father, overplayed his hand a little bit. But I don't know that Josh Heupel won this thing. I don't think there is a winner, but I don't believe that Josh Heupel suddenly has a better team because of all the players that rally behind him. One, I don't think players rally behind coaches that give a player a hard time. In general, I think they realize the shortcomings of what Iamaleava was doing. But I also would add this, Caleb, I just you lost a really good quarterback. And you don't have one that is proven. This could take Tennessee from 10 wins where I had them to 8. They've got a lot to replace, and now suddenly you have a quarterback that you have to replace. So did you think that Josh Heupel valiantly won this divorce, or how would you characterize it? Because I'm not buying that he was the one that ultimately pulled the trigger. I do believe it was Nico by not showing up at practice on Friday and by not taking any of his phone calls, which is what I'm told, from Thursday afternoon-ish to it's over.
Yeah, look, I think that I'll just be honest with you. I don't think Josh Heupel made the call on this. Now, Josh Heupel comes out looking better. I do think this, Dave. I'll say this up front. I think Tennessee did draw a line in the sand of saying we're not going to negotiate past this moment. That they didn't say we're going to move on from him, but I did think they held firm to say we're not negotiating here at this level right now. And I think that line in the sand was something that had an impact on Nico Iamaleava deciding to leave. But I don't think Josh Heupel said, you didn't show up for practice, so we're done with you. Get out of here. I don't think he did that. I'm just going to tell you this right now. I'm willing to bet a lot of money he didn't do that.
Well, and my history backs up all that you said. Now, I realize Philip Fulmer is one of the coaches I covered the most, but he was in love with talent. He'd bend over backwards for talent. And I think ultimately that Josh Heupel would have done that, but he was never given the opportunity to. I think if Nico picks up the phone, he tells him, hey, let's work this out. Let's get you on the field for the orange and white game. I don't think this was Josh Heupel saying you're out.
No, I don't think it's Josh Heupel saying you're out either. No, absolutely not. I think it's Josh Heupel basically here's what it is. It's almost like a situation of do you think it's a situation of Nico wanted Tennessee to come crawling back to him, and Tennessee was more like, kind of like, when your girlfriend like ghosts you for a day or so, and then you're like, you know what? I'll play her game. I'm not going to talk to her. I'm going to do my own thing. And then she like wants you to talk to her again. Do you think Tennessee was like, we'll let you back, but we're not going to come crawling back to you. We're going to move on with or without you. And the ball's in your court. And Nico decided, okay, if the ball's in my court, maybe not Nico, but they were like, we're leaving pretty much.
Well, either way, both parties, not Nico's dad, and Josh Heupel, because he essentially had to dug their heels in the sand, did they not?
Yes, they both sides dug their heels in the sand to a certain degree. And look, here's what the truth of the matter is, though. Part of this still leads to well, I mean, we'll talk about this in the second segment, I guess, because we're going to talk about who won the divorce. But in this way, it's like the way Heupel said it on Saturday, and I played the clip yesterday, Dave. He was asked, like, when did you know you were moving on from Nico? And Josh Heupel was like, nobody, not showing up for practice Friday, no communication, and then just said that, which implies that Heupel made the decision. But he was very careful not to say he made the decision. You know what I mean? So I think Heupel is, to his credit, he's getting out in front of this and he's spinning it from Tennessee's perspective. Because let's call this what it is. Paul Feinbaum said this on yesterday's show. this is the first holdout in college football NIL negotiations, right? This is like the first official holdout. And and honestly, in the first official holdout, it looks to the public like Josh Heupel didn't blink, and Tennessee was refusing to blink. Now, I do think so. Here's what I think. I do think this. I think Tennessee was standing its ground on what they were willing to negotiate with Nico. But Dave, I also think this. I don't think it was just about money. I do believe what TJ Houshmandzadeh said on Saturday, and I talked about this yesterday. I think the Nico team was trying to force Josh Heupel to incorporate pro-style elements into his offense. And I'll give my own speculation. I think they thought he was going to work on some of that in spring practice, and he didn't do any of that because, guys, spoiler alert, you don't go to Tennessee if you want to learn a pro-style offense.
Agreed, but there's also been a lot of talk, and I've been told that he wanted better players around him in the spring transfer portal.
I think he got those.
Yeah, the spring transfer portal just opens today. So
no. I think the better players was a winter negotiation. He wanted better protection, and that's why they got Sam Pendleton and Wendell Moe.
No, I tend to agree with that. I've been told he wanted more, though. He wanted another receiver. Now, you can't do that in the spring portal and expect them to have an impact in year one. It's just not going to happen. And it's not going to happen for Nico wherever he goes. He's probably going to be a backup to start the season. He goes to Tulane, North Carolina, or wherever. And I think him with Bill Belichick is pretty darn interesting. I would like to be a fly on the wall for those meetings.
Oh my gosh, that would be wild.
That would be golden. But essentially, this is not the first time that it happened with Nico. It happened, I'm told, before the college football playoff game against Ohio State. He understood the leverage, and he played it and played himself right out of a position at Tennessee, a starting position in the SEC. He is not going to do better than he did at Tennessee. 2 million, or let's say 2.2, I've heard, and potentially 2.5. He is not going to do better than he did at Tennessee. Let me reiterate that. He is going to a school with less football heritage and legacy. He's probably going to make the same or less money, and he might be on the bench this year. What the H, brought to you by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com. Why Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott Jones. Caleb, will Nico come even close to the same type of job he had at Tennessee? I say no. And I'll take it a step further. I think this affects his NFL future, not because teams are going to say, oh, man, we don't want a guy who's upset about money. They're all upset about money in the NFL. But just from the standpoint of he's going to have to learn two different offenses, it stunts his growth as a player. Caleb, I do think this turns him from a first 2 or 3 round pick to perhaps lower than that. And we know quarterbacks are overvalued, but here's the thing that people don't talk about in the NFL draft. They're also to some extent undervalued. After you get past that first grouping, quarterbacks will fall down the board. So could we be talking about a quarterback that you and I both thought was going to be in the NFL, was going to be a star in college and the NFL? Could we be talking about a guy who doesn't get drafted?
I mean, that's certainly possible. That is certainly a possibility by doing this. But I mean, from the other side, we could also be talking about a guy who goes and balls out at another school, and a Josh Heupel who goes 7-5 for the next 2 years. You know what I mean? So it's it depends on how this all plays out. I'll say this: if you commit to Tennessee, you commit to be a high draft pick to get the guaranteed dollars. Because truth be told, and I think you would agree with me on this, Dave, when you play in Tennessee's system, you play to put up the video game numbers, right? You don't play to be ready to go to the NFL for your rookie season. Like, isn't it kind of, you should almost accept the fact that if you're a rookie, you're going to have to relearn everything when you go to the NFL if you play for Josh Heupel, aren't you?
Yeah, you'll be. I mean, if he makes the NFL, I know some people in the message board don't think he's going to make the NFL. I think he has the talent to still do so, and I know that coaches their drafts on talent. So I still think he'll have a shot in the NFL, not nearly as good as he would have.
Yes, no, I agree. I think he'll have a shot in the NFL. I think that I think the big thing is, but getting back to who won the, I mean, getting back to who do we believe in this segment? Who? So you genuinely think Heupel is putting a media spin on the idea that he pulled the trigger?
Yes, I think that Bill Martin, who worked with him, got him to deliver a very concise, decisive message on Saturday after the orange and white game. I thought it was pretty obvious by the coverage of the Ball Network, who they're not supposed to be impartial, guys. They're not supposed to be objective. They were able to interview Josh Heupel during the game. I don't know if you heard that at all at times. And then right after the game, he was able to address it. Maybe it was just in the tail end of the game, but he had the narrative ready, and he made sure that the Ball Network was ready to ask those questions. And then he delivered it to the media as well. The worst thing he could have done is just brush it under the carpet.
Well, that narrative didn't just stay within Tennessee. That narrative got to everybody because it was all over ESPN yesterday, and the story was Josh Heupel didn't blink and decided to move on from Nico Iamaleava. So if that's the case, boy, did Tennessee put a good PR spin on this and do a good job of it. So our skepticism, guys, is that Nico ultimately made the decision to leave, not Tennessee. And
I believe that firmly.
You believe it firmly? Yeah.
I think Josh Heupel handled it the right way. I mean, he didn't call Spire Sports and have them cut another check immediately. He didn't just let it slide and Nico's not in the orange and white game and this is drama headed into this week. He didn't do that. He could have. I don't think he had much of a choice. I think this was a logical thing to do. I guess all the fawning over the way he handled it is a little strong for me. I don't know that he had a choice.
Yeah, I agree. That's kind of where I'm landing too. He didn't really have a choice, so he had to get out in front of it and put a PR spin. I'll just tell you guys this. You don't have a guy work with you throughout all of spring practice, be your starting quarterback, take all the first team reps, and then for one day of practice and put it this way. You're not making the decision to move on because of one day of skipped practice if he's your leader throughout all of spring practice, right? You're at least going to try to get to the bottom of the situation first.
I mean, how many players in the 30 or so years that I've 25 or so covered Tennessee do I remember skipping practice? I'm not going to count James Banks because he was there in attendance, but he wasn't practicing a lot of the time. I can remember two. Jawan Jennings left practice, right? And Albert Toina left in the middle of practice. That's three that are coming to the top of my head. And I did rack my brain earlier this morning to think about it. You just don't miss practice.
Well, didn't Albert Hainsworth just walk out of practice and then come back with a 10-foot pole?
Well, he was told to leave because he was about to destroy Will Off and Usel at the time, which would be bad for all parties involved.